Yeah, there it goes.
How's my
Okay.
audio coming through? I'm not using a mic or anything.
No, you're good. You're real good.
Okay.
Hang on. Why is it not? Hang on. Oh, wait a minute. All right, let me tag you real quick. Boom, boom. All right. Robert Hoff tagged. All right. Here we go. Episode 46, 2025. Uh, in this sacred space that we're trying to create, we're meeting new people and in the flesh, old friends. You said it's been what, like 7 or 8 years
Yep.
um, since we first connected. I know I've seen you out there for a long, long time. And first of all, let me just thank you for coming in and thank you for being flexible and letting me put this back a week. The energy is extremely high, and I have a feeling you'll be able to share some perspective on that. But thank you, Robert, for coming in. Thank you for what you've been doing all these years. Being yourself, speaking your mind, and keeping the momentum going, and not losing sight of what's real. That's what draws me to you, is that you aren't over opinionated. You are just kind of like direct and frank and yourself. So thank you for coming in and thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here. I love what you do.
So let's start with what's happening right now. Uh, how are you feeling? What's going on from your perspective, collectively and individually, and share what you want.
Sure. Wow, since we've last talked about 7 or 8 years ago now, a lot has changed. Uh, I would say I'm the same old, okay. Not just, living life content. Neither, uh, you know, if this was a bipolar thing, it wouldn't be manic, mania, or depressed or whatever. I'm just coasting through the middle. Um, that's how I like to write it. But yeah, it's man, so much has happened in those past 8 years. I don't even know where to begin. I guess shortly after we talked last, we moved from where I was at into a townhouse and stayed there for almost 5 years. And then 3 years ago, we finally bought a house for the first time, which wouldn't have been possible if I didn't join the military and use a VA loan. So
Mm,
it's been a journey. It's been fun, and I've been loving every minute of it so far.
mm, mm. So I know there was a pretty big month that we're just getting through with. We had two eclipses with a equinox in the middle. Um, some people follow the stars and the equinoxes and this and that. Did you feel anything different this month?
Um, a little bit. I don't really pay attention to all that anymore. I just uh, go through life one day, one moment at a time, and try to tune out all the noise. I would say, in the past month, there's been a few days where everybody just kind of seems a little bit sluggish and more tired as usual. And that happened, I would say, like maybe 2 weeks after daylight saving. Daylight saving didn't really affect us that much, and I guess maybe it hit us 2 weeks later or what have you. I don't know. I kind of don't really want to put cause to things like that happen. It's really can't explain things sometimes.
Yeah.
But and energetically speaking, I personally I maintain my own energetic aura, what have you. So I try not to let things affect me that might affect somebody that you know might be more, like more hypersensitive to those energies or something.
Mm. Well, it sounds like you spend the vast majority of your time focused on your own field.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, not like my own personal field. I just let that. It's more like a mindset. But how I spend my day to day is I go to work most 5 days a week. I come home and most of the time that I spend at home is with my family,
Yeah.
especially my son who's 10 years old. My daughter is about to turn 17, and so you know how that goes. That's an interesting journey in and of itself. There,
I've had four of those.
yeah.
I
Uh,
think actually when they turn about 11, the girls.
yeah, she when you look at the pandemic and the quarantine and the effects of that on young children and what stage of development they're in, I can see where her current state is not entirely like all because of her decisions and stuff. She's like a product of being affected at that certain stage in her development. And my son is a lot more resilient. He was obviously at a younger age during that, and but that said, I think quarantine was actually a really great time. I My family and I grew together so much. We learned how to like bake bread, discovered ourselves a little bit more personally, just discovered quality time with each other, learning new things together, spending time in nature. We lived by the townhouse was by a golf course, so my son and I would walk the golf course and we'd see all these cool things in nature, animals and stuff. And yeah, it was. I enjoyed it. I didn't have to work.
Wow. Yeah. There is always the yin to the yang, right? I mean, you
Exactly.
could
Yeah.
say that like, that whole thing was obviously strategized, planned. We might even say from a certain perspective, ill-intended, but there was another side to it. And we talked about it on the shows during that period from time to time in the sense of what you actually experienced, which is to actually have more presence with yourself and your family, that core part of your experience. And it sounds like that's kind of a microcosm of your whole, we might call it ascending path or awakening or whatever you want to call the last 12 or 14 years. You've actually done it with a partner, you've done it with children. And I think that's probably a perspective we haven't dived into a lot, at least not in the podcasts I've been involved with. But I would imagine in in some way you must be receiving code from your partner, from your children, and obviously from yourself ultimately. Uh, and maybe have a little different perspective on it, uh, being more focused on what's going on locally as opposed to all the narratives and prophecies and predictions and the
Mm,
script of the world stage. Does
mm.
that sound like what your uh, modus operandi has been?
Actually, yeah, I would totally agree with that. That's another thing too that came about from being in quarantine was when the last time we had spoken. I forget where on my journey I was with modular mathematics, but during the quarantine, I really had the time to focus and dive into it a little bit more with a fresh, more current perspective. And so at that time, I actually like kind of uh, went into like hypersonic mode with it and just discovered all these new things that I may not have been able to previously quote unquote decode or remember. Um, so that was definitely played a big part in my journey. From one thing that I've noticed is that like when it comes to that kind of stuff, I'll go through these like phases where usually happens around like fall of every year for some reason. For like a month or two or something, I just get super out of nowhere like start questioning things and diving deeper and regaining my knowledge or expanding on my knowledge. Um, and then it, slowly builds and builds over time. And here we are today.
Can you tell us a little bit about this math thing? I don't know what you called it, but it sounds like something you might have downloaded or, come into at some point early on when we talked, like
Mhm.
whatever that was, 2015 or whatever. And you were talking about how that it sounded like it spoke louder to you, came in more fully. And if I might ask too, like what did that bring to the table for you in terms of moving forward in the experience?
Um, so it kind of feels like this was all stuff I already knew, and it was just a
Mm,
matter of relearning it and remembering it. Um, it all really, I don't know when it began. I would say maybe 2010 or so, around there, um, where I started like getting into the occult and stuff like that, and hidden knowledge and gnosis, and I came across numerology, and that was really like the springboard. Was I wasn't really too concerned with like what each number meant. I was more concerned with how finding the digit sums of strings of numbers. There's two ways to go about that. You can take a string of numbers and add them together until you get a single digit, and then keep doing that until you get a single digit. Or you can do it as you go along, where you can, 5 plus 5 is 10, drop the 0, 1, plus the next number, whatever, and then keep doing that. So like reducing to a single digit as you go along the number string, adding is a lot easier to do in your head. Um, and that led to me questioning about repeating numbers. And so I got a sheet of paper out. It always seems to start on a sheet of paper and a pen. And I wrote out, I actually have it as a part of my pinned tweet on Twitter, um, where it shows like all the ones and all the twos and all the threes. And then I put it together into a table. It's a table, really. Uh, and I put a feeler out there. I was like, does anybody know what this is? And somebody finally came back to me, and they're like, oh, that's the Vedic square. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then from there, it's just like it all kind of like unzipping the file. I know you guys like to use like, downloading codes and all that. It was kind of like unzipping this massive file of information. And, again, bits and pieces over time, where I'd put it away in the back burner, forget about it, come back to it. And so that's where I'm at now. Is I'm trying to see how through that modular lens we can transform math and physics as we know it. When you actually look into modular mathematics and forms, it's actually the fifth fundamental um, property. So you have addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Well, they've actually added the fifth as modular forms in mathematics. So um, it's pretty fascinating stuff. It's definitely a good way to a lens to look at things.
mm. Do you feel like that you had some kind of ancestral or ancient or soul connection to this particular um, you know, stream of this modular mathematics? Like,
Oh,
was
absolutely.
there,
Hmm.
yeah, go ahead.
No, no, keep going. Keep going. Sorry.
Well, I just mean like, did it kind of bring you into a greater awareness of who you are to yourself and your inner knowing?
It did, and again, though, it seems for me, anyways, more like a re-remembering.
Mm.
Um, I feel like I kind of play this game with myself, where I drink from the river Lethe, or forgetfulness, before I incarnate, and then try to break through that to go back to remembering Mimazine.
Mm.
So uh, yeah, it's been pretty funny this time around. it feels like again, like I already knew it, and I'm able to kind of put it out there in art and math and science is more of like, hey, this is like a ancient forgotten tool that we have, and more people need to know about it. And so I make it a part of my art and knowledge that I bring to social media because I don't really do much in real life socially, but
You do plenty. You do the good stuff with your family. Um,
that's
is there in your mind? I mean, because the way I look at it is there's a whole bunch of stuff that we came into this with, whether we remember or not.
mm-hmm.
But there's the experience, which gives us something we didn't have
Oh,
before we came
experience
in.
huge. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then like almost like we're on the other side now, where we combine the two in a new form of creativity. You're an artist, so I know that you know what I'm talking about, and that doesn't just mean making a piece of art, but actually the creativity of living, of going through life.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like, from your present human aspect, a correlation between this ancient connection you've had with this particular mathematics uh, into living life now? Like, in other words, is it just being exposed to it, even if we don't understand it as you share it, or is there some kind of correlation to how you can apply it, if that makes sense?
Um, well, to go back on and to answer more a bit in depth of your last question as well, my dreams have played a big part in this. I've had a bunch of several recurring dreams since I was a child that I never ever was able to figure out. I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is this? And it wasn't until later in life through my experiences where things would come to pass and it would be like, oh, this dream was a prophecy of my life. Or, oh, this is just remembering again something that I already knew. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like this weird middle gray area. it's, it's if I try to answer your question in short there. Um, can you ask it one more time
No,
again?
no,
Sorry.
no, I think we're on this. I got it. Okay, so it's a lot like this. So we've been used to verbalization, to, explanation, conversation, you know what I mean? Give and
Mhm,
take of that, the intellect part. And just as you talked about repeating numbers, so like, for a lot of people, it started with Reiki, but, in terms of synchronicity, it started with like 1111,
mhm,
5555 or whatever it may be. And I think what I'm picking up from you anyway, and I can relate to this, is in the sense of something's communicating that isn't speaking in normal terms, or say human terms, conventional terms, and that it's uh it's almost like you're getting it, you're exposed to it. You may not understand it because we're still coming out of this dominant egoic or human linear kind of mind frame,
mhm,
but that it's to come out, and as you're guided through your art to share it, that it offers code, uh, such as other methods that people have, but the bottom line being that they were guided to do that. They connected with something, you might say, in their past or in their history or in their lineage, and that it came forth as part of their awakening. And part of that, or the next part of that maybe, is to express it and share it without consideration of what people think, or, I'm looking for, fame or whatever, but just to put it out there and be comfortable with that. That's kind of
mhm.
what I'm picking up from you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I got it. And that, that actually reminded me of something that I wanted to talk about there was, are you familiar with Salvador Dali's Crucifixion, the painting?
If
Uh,
I saw it, I probably would be. You want me to look it
so
up?
it's Jesus on a cross, but the cross is a hypercube. and below the hypercube is a black and white checkerboard with a smaller figure. Um, I like to use that as like a perfect example of how we kind of go about through life. Um, I know you're familiar with the concept of the higher self, but you know how hard it is for the higher self to communicate with you, and vice versa as a two-way radio. Um, more, it's more so of like, you know, a ghost of yourself that tries to nudge you along the way through your current incarnation. And that's the way I see it. Um, you know, if there's this thing called the holographic principle where basically there's a one-to-one correspondence. So if you have like a cell, you have a nucleus of the cell, and then you have a shell. And what's the information that's encoded on the shell is encoded in the nucleus, and vice versa. So I think that's how we go about through life in the physical realm, is that we have our own higher consciousness. Some people call that God or what have you. Um, and it's a one-to-one correspondence. You have that. A lot of people talk about it. They call it the silver cord that connects them through astral projection and stuff like that. Um, so that's kind of the way I see it. Is we have that as like our biggest cheerleader, is our higher self. The point before we incarnated, um, which is, I would call it fractalizing consciousness. So you came from that before, you fractalized yourself as you reincarnated into a new form, and you're communicating back via that higher self.
So the downloads become an upload.
It, like, you know, yeah, like I said, it's a two-way radio.
Right.
A lot of people, you know, can tune into that and make it a two-way radio fully, or you know, strengthen one end more so than the other, or calibrate it to harmonize both and have a good relationship with it. It's just, you know, I call it the universe experiencing itself. You know, everything breaking down into fractalizing and into as many different possibilities and combinations as possible in order to learn and experience.
Do you feel like there's some kind of convergence occurring? And let's just use your example that you just gave us, but like in terms of, I'm just going to try to put it this way, but like um, in this process or in this experience that you're talking about, but applying it to real time right now, one way to say it might be that we're on this path where obviously whatever that is, the higher self, the soul, the infinite intelligence that we've all had our own experiences with and interactions with, but that has gotten louder and louder. And obviously we revere it, we respect it, we give it credence and love it. But at the same time, what I'm getting at is, are you finding any type of correlation or relationship between the reverence and honor and love for that and for your human being aspect as well, for its input and its uh, potential uploads?
Gotcha. I think that convergence and divergence, the duality of it, happen both internally to ourselves and in the exterior world around us. So we might look at the world from our perspective, and you know, let's say a person is trying to converge into a harmonized state of being, whereas some people diverge from themselves and they split themselves, and they, you know, they don't face their trauma head on, or what have you. And you can see that in the world as well. You see people trying to come together for the betterment of all people, and you see people that just live in out of a state of fear and hatred, and are embodying that divergence. So it's, you know, it's really hard to say right now. There's you know, the vortex is going in every which way possible right now, it seems like.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The old saying of the more I know, the less I know kind of
Yeah,
applies.
yeah, Yeah,
But I think
exactly.
I think what I'm fishing for in myself, and even in this conversation, is um, how do you say this? Let me just use this backdrop. I interviewed or I collaborated with Franco Di Nicola 52 times. We did 52 shows,
Mm,
and he had extraordinary intel. Past life remembrances of other planets, other ascensions, etc. And I would ask him from time to time, does the human have a soul? And he would say, no, but yes.
mm,
Okay. And he explained that there was a soul lineage and then there was a human lineage, right? So you could say that it's a tributary, off of the soul lineage, but that, yes, there was a soul aspect to it. So my question is, like, at this point in the game, where do you place, and there's no right or wrong, I'm just curious, uh, the potential value of the human's input into our multidimensionality, basically. In other words, do we have something to offer that hasn't been offered before? And as an artist, as a creator, how do we share that? Does that make
mm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would agree with the person that you said how we can trace our soul through the cosmos and also our reiterations or reincarnations in the human physical form. Um, so yeah, that's how I feel about that as well. Um, what? Sorry, I'm really tired today. As my
Well,
Monday
no,
getting
it's
back
okay.
to
I
work,
get it.
but
No, but like, I mean, you're obviously very deep. You're very tapped in. You're living I would say, for the most part, and not in a bad way towards you or towards anyone else, but most of the light workers that I've talked to are single or they're nomadic or, and you run into mothers that are running a household and that type of thing. But you've been doing this for several years. That's what I was saying earlier with your partner, with your children, and you seem very balanced. I mean, you've got a good take on everything. I'm just wondering, someone like you, from your perspective, is there some coding within the human experience that's coming to the forefront? A lot of people talk about shadow work and things that come out and getting on the other side and seeing the gold in the shadow and so on. But are you seeing any of that in yourself or anyone around you or even in the field?
um, in myself, in the sense that if you, I have a problem with placing expectations on humanity and then disappointing myself when those
Mm,
expectations aren't met.
mm,
And that's kind of how it feels right now. It's like you know, pulling at the rug a little bit, and there's something else pulling back on the other side in humanity right now. You see division everywhere, um, but you also see people coming together as well.
mm, mm,
So it's really hard to say. Um, like I alluded to earlier, it's both a divergence and a convergence. I would say right now, on a global scale, it's more of a divergence. On smaller circles like your family and your neighborhood and your inner circles and stuff, those are converging. Um, but it's a tough cookie to crack right now because one of the reasons why I try to tune out all the noise in the world is because I'd rather do my own thing and bring convergence into what I can bring it into instead of divergence. Because if you look for hate, you will find hate. If you look for love, you'll find love. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do in my own life, and my everybody that I encounter is just approaching them as, you are a person. Uh, Based on that alone, I respect you. I'm going to believe you until you prove me wrong. I'm going to be kind to you until you not don't return the favor. Um, I guess, does that answer your question?
I don't know. I'm enjoying the conversation. Um, yeah. So let me ask you this. I mean, I'm just trying to get some, you know, because to me, it really well, there's so many ways to like try to dive into this, but part of it would seem to be, Morgan said to me a couple of years ago, it's like we're having a life review in form, right?
Mm,
So you
mm,
hear a
mm.
lot of people talk about NDEs and out of body, and they have this life review where you can feel everything that you ripple out from your thoughts, words, and actions, right? So it's almost like you can put yourself in someone else's shoes. So I like to get more perspective to, give me more to paint with, basically.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot of different subjects in these circles, you might say. And one of them, trying to stay with the energy, right? Not the story or the literal part, but masculine and feminine. So, and even golden child, the third energy, the energy created by those two things, whether it be a person, whether it be a relationship like you and your partner, or children in the physical form, or that energy in the physical form or not. Uh, have you seen has there been anything over the last few years as we've all collectively ascended? Because we have. I mean, there's definitely an expansion, even though there is that divergence and convergence. But have you, in your world, seen changes, in the masculine energy, be it you or a child or someone around you or whatever, father, whatever, and the feminine, or even in your relationship? And don't go any deeper, obviously, than you want to. But I'm just saying, have you seen any of that playing out in your household, in your life?
In my house, no.
Mm,
Um, I would say when I jump on social media, I see it everywhere.
mm,
Um, and I don't know if that's just the algorithm feeding me garbage or what, but um, is there is a really big push to go back to the old ways that weren't working. A lot of patriarchy, where women are like property and become subservient to the male. I'm seeing a lot of that. Suppressing scientific knowledge, denying that there is global climate change going on, things of that sort. So in my personal life, not really. In the bigger picture, from what I've seen on social media, yes.
mm. And I'm curious too, like, and again, no right or wrong, because it's so complex. But so, in terms of what we see, any of us, be it the world stage or anything else external, is it, is it, uh, are you able to equate that with yourself? Uh, is it something you see outside of yourself? Um, is it something you have to come to terms with or put up a boundary or a wall? I guess what I'm saying is those things that we see that are not in alignment with the heart space, with the soul, whatever it may be, the fuckery, whatever it is. How do you deal with that? How do you identify with that or not?
Um, well, how do I deal with it? I would say through beer and smoking and cannabis. I mean that's
Transparency.
that yeah, that's the truth right there. For my experience. But you have to remember too that everything is really it's everything is relative and it's all subjective.
Mm,
From your own point of view, you go through the world and all that you know is your own point of view. You can try to as hard as you can to jump into other people's shoes, but you'll never fully understand them and where they're
sure.
coming from and what they're seeing. And that's one of the things that gets me right now is that there's this thing circulating called the empathy of sin, or empathy is a sin, and it hurts me deeply when people say that because how can you not care about every single human on this planet? How can you not care about the environment that we all share? Like it's just illogical. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So how are you going to call somebody that feels the weight of the world on their shoulders, who cares for the weakest among us, and wants to place the emphasis on those people? How do you call that a sin? It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So when I see hatred towards like LGBTQ people, or the huge like anti-trans thing that they're going on right now against these people, and it's just like, why? There's no point. How does what somebody do with their own lives affect you? It doesn't. And so that it's not. I've been learning to deal with it as a trigger better. Not letting it blacken my heart, but it hurts it when people are so obliviously hateful. It's like a dagger going through my heart, and I numb it with alcohol and cannabis and tobacco.
Yeah, it's a multi-dimensional line. Like
Yeah, you have to love it all. You
if
have
you
to.
look at, let's say 10 years ago, and you took a snapshot of what like something like you just described, it's a different thing. Like there's 10 years down the road now, there's self-responsibility, self-accountability, uh, for being a conscious quantum thought creator, for what we see is what is kind of thing. So it's a really weird thing. I've heard that word a lot this year, the first three
Yeah,
months from
weird.
my own
Yep.
mouth too. It's weird. But yeah, like I mean, like in terms of I don't know, you mentioned triggers, and you've been very, very honest. I mean, you know, you've got this foundation, in the physical, with the energies of the masculine, the feminine, the children, the family, and then also contributing, primarily focusing on that, which is really the greatest contribution we can make. It's not out there; it's right here, right now, where we're at, being present.
Yep.
But then to have the humanness, the humanity, to look at these things, and we know there's fuckery everywhere, right? I mean, we know. And like you said, if you want to look for the shit, you're going to find it. And if you want to look for the shift, you're going to find it. So it's always out there. And then you come down to this point, and maybe, and I know I'm not the only one, where the conversation with the universe gets deeper and deeper and says, okay, what's the difference between that faction over there, whatever that may be? Let's say it's the LBGQT, right? And the Zionist or the Illuminati or the Catholic Church or this or that. Like there are there is energy and consciousness and people, you might say, that are on the other side of this. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's almost like I heard one time, just very generally speaking, to make the point that those one percenters who are now the powerless powers that be, um, they actually have as much conviction and veracity in their efforts as we do. In other words, they feel like they're doing the right thing. I mean,
Yep.
and without getting into clones and souls and but just keeping it simple, that's where I kind of feel that this whole, you might say, movement or awakening has come to, where we have to actually go even deeper with this, you might say, divine neutrality or zero point or soul highway. But to actually do that in the flesh, and maybe there's no point of perfection,
No,
but
there's no.
you know what I mean?
Per,
But while
yeah.
we're incarnated, but is there something in us that's gone through the different civilizations, so many that we don't know, but let's just say Lemuria, Atlantis, etc. We come here, uh, that keeps pushing us to integrate or converge the polarities, even in a distorted duality. I mean, is there something in us that drives us to continue to marry every extreme in the spectrum?
Um, I would look at that from a biological perspective.
Mm.
Um, when you look at the evolution of life on this planet, it started simple and grew in complexity over time. Um, when you look at human beings in particular, we've undergone 6 periods of encephalization, which is adding layers onto your brain, or more densely packing neurons and their connections in your brain. It makes us smarter, more aware, more harmonious with the universe. So over time, I think that is just what the answer to your question is, just a natural byproduct of evolution.
Yeah.
Um, the emergence of a rosebud into a full flower, so to
Yeah.
speak. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think right now we are undergoing uh, this period of transition where we are um, adding more neurons into our corpus callosum, the brain part of our brain that bridges the left and right hemispheres, or metaphorically the masculine and the feminine. Our prefrontal cortex, which is delegates like how we see things and imagine things. So we do see that, but we also see people that, if there were analogy, you have like, and somebody actually said this on Twitter today that I answered with. Um, we either have our heads stuck in the sand or our heads stuck in the clouds, and that divergence, I think what's happening is people are digging themselves further and further into the sand, rather than trying to dig themselves out and get their heads back into at least breathable air, and then into the clouds.
Mm.
um, I, it's a bit like it's a big soup. It's really hard to say, but I would say, generally speaking, there is this subconscious drive in humans to understand things more, whether that be themselves or the universe, um, life as we know it. I've definitely been on that kick lately. I've been on the internet since since way back in the day, when it first became mainstream, or shortly after it became mainstream. Um, I was on MIRC as a little kid, talking to trivia bots and downloading files, movies, and songs and stuff directly from other people's computers. You had to know coding in order to do that, basic coding. And it seems like right now is like a culmination almost from then until now, where I'm really, really excited to use AI, because it can finally put things together in a succinct way that would have taken me decades to do on my own. Um, and putting when I put those things together, and I ask and I test it, and does this work with this? And then it comes back and says, no, the math doesn't work out on this. And um, so it's just like an experience, you're going through, and I'm really, again, really excited to be where we are today, because I truly believe that, technologically speaking, we don't have to answer like where the universe came from. There's no point in that. It's like irrelevant. The why is doesn't matter, but the how. If we can figure out the how, we can advance humanity light years ahead of where we are right now. Because I think that we're either, one, as a species, going to self-destruct. Two, the Earth is going to rid itself of us, or try to shake us off as best as it can, like it has in the past. Um, or three, we continue down this road where the wealthy own everything and the poorer get poorer, and it's very dystopic. And I've had those dreams. I really, really don't want those dreams to happen. So I think that technology, if we use it correctly, can really propel humanity into the future, and harmonize uh, each person, help harmonize each person to the universal wavelength. Imagine if you didn't have to go to work to earn a paycheck. Imagine all that free time that you could have spending on yourself, doing self-reflection, learning new skills and hobbies, developing the ones you already have. Again, spending more quality time with your family, making sure that they develop themselves to their full potential as well. So that's my hope, and that's kind of where I think that we see us right now. Is like we're kind of on the precipice, but it's really up to us to get there, to get over that hump. Whether or not that's going to happen is a giant question mark.
That's a lot, but it's deep. Um, and I really, I really like what you said about the tech, um, because the tech 100 years ago was, you know, I don't know, a steam engine or, I mean, it's part of that evolution you're talking about because there's many, many different streams that are running parallel through the expansion, the constant expansion. And I really like your own personal perspective, when you were talking about AI as an example, and what you said about your life in the beginning, going to work, coming home, being with family, et cetera, et cetera. Um, how you're giving credit or credence to all those things that are out there. But at the end of the day, you're focusing on your own environment and what you might say, for lack of a better word, control. Um, that's your contribution. That to me speaks very loudly. And then you make me think as well, which is great. That's why I love doing this. So I think part of what seems to be coming to a fork in the road, if you will, is even how do you say this without sounding like fluffy love and light, but like at some point, those things that have become irrelevant or inconsequential in terms of affecting me in what I do, in spending my time with my family, and devoting myself at work, in my art, in my exploration of self, and so on, and sharing that you do, right? As using you as an example, almost like we've come to a crossroads where we walk away from that fully, almost like there's no in between. Now, some people talk about two Earths, and you've heard it, with the solar flares that were going to come every year for the last 10 years and all that. I'm not making fun of anyone, but I guess I am. So, but my point is like, and again, we try to understand and frame these things up in literal 3D concepts, images, explanations, definitions, but almost like a split occurring in terms of the band of frequencies or dimension that each might offer. Is one staying the same and becoming more intense in its energy as people give to it, and the same for the other, the difference being consciously moving away from this. So I guess where I'm going with this is, um, do you feel that it's something that will that's fading or might be fading, or that's becoming less of an impression and influence upon you as you look at these things on the external that are the fuckery and the bullshit and all that? And we all have those perspectives, even though they may not be the same issues. But do you feel like that's something that will be fading, or do you feel like that's something that will stay with us to allow us to have that friction between the one side and the other?
Gotcha. Um, I think in order to best answer that, we would have to look at entropy
Mhm.
and cosmology and astrophysics. Um, right now, we know that the universe is expanding. We know that we're entering a phase where dark matter takes over. Um,
Can you elaborate on that? I'm just because like I don't follow anything in particular, but like I've heard of the Kali Yuga, which I mentioned earlier, the
mhm.
Mayan calendar on or about these dates. Let's just say this time, Age of Aquarius and all that. When you say that we're entering a time, what did you say? Black matter? or dark matter, dark matter.
Dark matter, yeah.
Where were we, and are we in an in between transition space right now and going into this dark matter phase or whatever? And what is that? Could you mind elaborating?
Yeah, of course. We are in the transition phase. Um, but from a cosmological standpoint, it's just something that is happening when we study the universe and the history of the universe, and kind of gauge where we're headed. Um, if you want to really go into the future, what you're talking about is a convergence or a unification into yeah, I think you call it the 5D, uh, would be the best analogy from my experience with you, as a word that everybody would understand here is. So it would be like in the far future, um, the universe, they say that it's going to collapse on itself and create a singularity. Um, in that in that instance, so from a growth period, like planting a seed in the soil, you have that time where it's in the dark. It's preparing itself to spread its roots and come poke its head above ground and see sunlight and blossom and grow into this, whatever plant. And it's the same thing with the universe. Where we're at on that timeline is kind of hard to say. Um, it kind of blows people's mind when you tell them about what's called the galactic year, which is one revolution of the sun around the center of the Milky Way. It's about 250 million years. It's kind of hard for somebody to wrap their head around that length of time because it makes us feel so small and insignificant. Um, so when we look, and part of science right now is exploring, trying to measure what's happening in the universe uh, from what we can observe. There's the cosmic radiation field, there's Hawking radiation, um, the cosmic microwave background, stuff like that, and they're trying to measure that to gauge where we're at in this entropy. Like, how long do we have until it goes back to zero? Um, but the leading theory is the Big Bang theory. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I'm more of a big bounce person. Uh, in the big bounce, all information is conserved and it avoids singularities. So, like, even if the universe collapses on itself, it could have collapsed every second for the entire time we've been talking. You don't know. But as a huge, ginormous universe, the big bounce is just going to happen like that, and it's going to go down, and then it's going to start expanding again. Um, but again, there's so many possibilities. It's hard to say for sure what it is, what is going to happen. Uh, in our From our human point of view, again, it's really hard to say. When you've alluded to the fork in the road, that divergence, and just to hit on that real quick, mathematically, it's called bifurcation. Um, if you take a thing and split it in half, that's called bifurcating, and that actually is the precursor to chaos. But there is always order in chaos. You just have to have the lens to see it. And going back to modular mathematics, looking at it through that lens, you can see that a lot more clearly. For example, I'm sure you've heard of Fibonacci and the Fibonacci sequence. With modular mathematics, Fibonacci was actually also a modular mathematician, and this is called Pisano periods. So if you have period n equals, let's say, 5, the Fibonacci sequence stops at 20 digits and recurses back on itself and loops back. So it's cyclical. That's the basic premise of modular mathematics, is that it shows periodicity and cyclicity. alluding to the fact that time is cyclical, but experienced linearly. Uh, so imagine like the universe is like this big, this glowing orb that has a low hum to it, steady hum. And you're outside of it in the vacuum of pure space, just as pure consciousness, ready to incarnate. You jump in, and it's kind of like a time bubble where you're like an arrow going straight through it. Your experience is like an arrow going straight through it, and time moves linearly because of that. Where on the outside of that bubble, or the orb or whatever, time doesn't exist because it's cyclical.
Mm.
So you can, when you're outside of that, you experience all time, all things. And I think that's where our higher selves reside. And like I said, your higher self, they can't explicitly tell you what to do or send you certain things, or, they can basically just give you little hints, like breadcrumbs to help you get there, like little nudges, but they're not going to give you the full answer. Otherwise, what would be the point of coming into this,
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes those signals get loud, especially lately. um, so you were talking about the orb and the arrow through the orbs. So you're in this field, and within that field, there's an orb, and in that orb is contained the dimension of time, linear time.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
That's one way to say it, right?
Yep.
So we go through it as the arrow, and I'm trying to go back to what I was talking about before to go to get deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the fact that we're going through this orb and it's surrounded by timelessness, let's just say that the higher self or soul atmosphere, um, the things that we are experiencing within the orb that are taking away from our awareness of what we really are, which is really what's outside the orb, and how that equates to what we're doing here, what do we create now. And I guess where I'm going with this is, and again, there's no right or wrong, I'm just trying to find some answers for myself. Are we in a state where there is a payoff if we can tap into that oversoul that's outside the orb, and embody that and create something that with infinite possibilities? I might say that I'm prejudiced.
Mm-hmm.
Or and and becoming more effective and efficient at that as we let go of the story occurring within the orb. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, are we in a space like that? Will this um, experience with all of its attributes remain with us? Or, people talk about breaking out of the matrix and this and that, whatever, but I'm just talking about converting the experience on a personal level and therefore collectively, which does follow many, I'm not saying all of them, but does follow prophecy, sacred text, this and that, which at the end of the day, it's not worth the paper it's written on, because right now is all that we really have. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you think that there is something happening with us in this present time and space, if you will, that is not something that comes around every now and then?
Sure.
It's like the ending of the cycle of cycles, you might even say. All the planets are aligning for a momentary period of time, called 1,000 years of peace, call whatever you want, but that there is a opportunity to really jettison out there in terms of personal growth from a soul level, regardless of whatever incarnation you're in and the multidimensionality that you're conscious of that you are. Do you
Mm-hmm.
see something like that? I mean, do you feel like this is a special time, or is it just every
Well,
time all moments are special?
uh, I think all moments are special, but um, I would say to answer your question, um, going back to the periodicity thing, the cyclicness of
Mm.
everything. Uh, Economists know this, that everything, the economy comes in waves. When you look at uh, the Renaissance and other periods of history where there was like a mass sort of awakening, to so to speak, you know, it's kind of like riding a roller coaster. And the roller coaster is a sine wave. You know, it goes up, it comes down, it goes up, it comes down. Um, the ride going up, imagine yourself on a roller coaster, you got to get to that peak, right? And it's kind of slow, and it feels like it's going to take forever to get there. And you're just like, get me to the drop. That's where the adrenaline is. And then you get to the top, you get to the precipice, and that little nudge um, pushes you over, and then you go down real fast. I think we're about to go down real fast, but it always comes back up again. And that's the thing that you have to remember, is that it's always going to come back up again. That's kind of like the hope and faith that it takes to get through, to build resiliency in life, to overcome, adapt, and overcome any situation or feeling or what have you that you come experience in your life. Going
Mm.
back to personal development, I always think that there's always going to be space for people to grow themselves. There's always going to be space for people to grow collectively. Um, the noise that we've been talking about falls back on this very simple principle that I've tried to teach through every incarnation, and it's that it's I call it the 1 + 1 = 2. All right, so I don't believe in religions. I always, I don't, I take whatever people say like kind of, with a grain of salt. I hear them, I interpret it, and come out with it from pick at it, and come out with what I like or disagree with, what have you, like we all do. Um, but wow, where's I going with this? The 1 + 1. So it's you and everything else, but it's not just that, because in order to fully experience it, you have to have heightened self-awareness. You have to have heightened situational or environmental awareness. So to me, when you do that, when you increase both of those simultaneously, you are automatically filtering out all the noise and all the bullshit. You don't have space in your mind to think about those things that don't, they're inconsequential. They don't matter. Um, and I think that's one of the key things that every human needs to understand. It's kind of one of the frustrating things I have with my daughter, because she doesn't have much self-awareness, and I'm always trying to instill that within her. Um, but that is really the foundation of how we should all move through life, is just trying as hard as we can constantly to have deep self-awareness with a profound sense of everything going on around us.
Mm. Mm.
I hope that answers your
Do you
question.
feel that? No, no, that's great. Yeah, yeah. A couple of things. One, two questions. They're pretty close. Do you feel like we're in a time when the accessibility to what you're talking about, as well as the awareness, obviously, is more rampant, more available? And do you feel that uh, this state of being that you're describing, which I think a lot of people can relate to, might or might not have um, byproducts of going into a higher frequency and or dimension where we might see in the physical body things like teleportation and bilocation and greater senses of clairs and telekinesis, etc., higher telepathy and such. Do you feel like that's something that comes from consistent, foundationally speaking, and living like that, and that's something that we might realize, in our experience?
I think
Something.
sorry, to
Go
go
ahead.
back on previously what I've said is, what was I going to say now? Um, shoot.
Let me ask you this way. Um, do you feel like that
I had it.
one person, 10 people, whatever, operating like that, uh,
Oh,
enters a
oh, okay.
space where they can ignite something that is beyond the normal human experience? It supersedes all the bullshit and makes it irrelevant. And we're living in a different space that has all these, you might say, higher dimensional attributes.
Gotcha. Okay, and okay, that's it. So going back to human development and the encephalization of the brain, I think that is going to be just like a routine thing in the future. All those things you've talked about, ESP, all the mental abilities, what have you. I think that's just a stage of development that humans will eventually go to. It's going to take a lot of time to get there.
Mm.
Obviously, the more people that practice these things, the better it's going to be for humanity. Um, and when I look at it from a perspective of the internet, because this was going to be part of my question that I forgot, my answer to that I forgot there was, so the internet's great, right? You have this profound ability to connect with anybody that possesses the same simple technology. Um, However, the downside of it is people that use it for nefarious reasons. So what you have are people that come out with like ancient knowledge and things, but it gets drowned out, it seems like, with all the misinformation and disinformation that people put out there. For what reason, I don't know, whether it's to get clicks or likes or followers or whatever. They're putting it out there. Somebody's putting it out there. So it's both a good and a bad thing that's happening right now, and it makes it tougher for people to get on that self and situational awareness to maximize that. It's a big part of the human condition to seek out drama and tension, um, whether it's out of boredom or what in their own lives, but it is a part of the human condition to seek out drama. Um, and that's what we're seeing right now is we're having the flip side of this awesome thing called the internet. The flip side is all the noise that we're getting bombarded with while we're using it. Um, Again, there's this correlation between technology and humans right now. So I think that what we can infer from what's happening technologically speaking, on the internet or whatever, is happening to us on a physiological scale as well. So to answer your question in short, we are going to get there, but it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of people digging themselves their heads out of the sand, getting rid of all that noise, and I think that's going to be a challenge, a big challenge as we move forward. Um, Unfortunately, the universe is dynamic. Uh, the power laws, bifurcation is part of power laws. The All of that comes into play when you look at it from just a pure mathematical standpoint. You can kind of see the picture of where it's going. Um, Overall, though, the goal is harmonization, bridging the left and the right hemispheres, we will get there. It's going to be a matter of time, but it's going to be a long time, I think. We can personally do it. We can take ourselves off the cross, off the hypercube, metaphorically speaking, quote unquote, save ourselves. What that's going to do is when we are, physically dead and we move on to the next realm of existence, we now carry along the knowledge that we've attained through this life. And we can say, hey, you know what? Maybe I don't have to reincarnate on the planet again so soon. Maybe I don't have to do it to save it. Maybe I can spend a lifetime on this place or this place and this thing or in this thing instead, have it go on like a little vacation or what have you. Maybe, maybe I don't want to come back until we do have telepathy and telekinesis. It's a more of a personal choice. So to get to that personal awareness affects your personal journey after this. And I think we could actually start to see that happening now with the decline in birth that's happening worldwide right now, because I don't think that people really, or souls rather, really want to reincarnate into this timeline right now, because it is going to be filled with hardship to get through down that slope back to the upwards on the roller coaster ride. It's going to be challenging and difficult, and it takes a certain type of person to keep going back into that over and over to try to get that sled back up the hill. But
Yeah, we're the crazy ones.
yeah,
If you
but
use the
mhm,
many people that are in these conversations and communities over the years can identify with the dark night of the soul, right? That period where we went into that void and hit rock bottom and came out of it. And I feel like that's something we will realize more and more as time goes on. The power of it.
mhm.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's a fantastic. But listening to you and filling into my own, what I'm getting for myself or whatever, it almost sounds like uh, we're going to go into this dark night to reveal everything and pop out on the other side. Do you feel that we're going to come out the other side into a higher dimension, into those that space that you were talking about where we have those higher level dimensional attributes like a higher telepathy, etc.?
That's actually interesting because I I think it was actually yesterday or the day before, I asked AI what would happen if the entire world went through a dark night of the soul.
Mhm.
And its answer was really interesting. Um, it either resulted in pure chaos, or what you speak of, where we do all come out on the other side. Realistically speaking, though, a lot easier said than done. Um, Again, I think it's more of a personal transformation than a collective. It could be collective, if you and
Mm,
your
mm,
soulology friends want to decide, hey, like after this life, let's meet on the next plane and start something new, fresh somewhere together or whatever.
mm,
There's nothing stopping you from doing that.
mm.
Um, but also, you can't change things that are already in motion, like the history of the Earth, the revolution of the Earth around the sun as it goes through the Milky Way galaxy. Um, these are things that you can't stop.
I'm just curious, and again, there's no right or wrong. I love this. I really do. Um, are you open to the possibility that what you have and I have referred to as a universe from our own comprehension, from our own understanding, uh, is possibly a fish bowl in the far corner of a crevice in the multiverses that has its own mathematics behind it fuckery, behind it control, whatever the case is, to include the stars, to include everything that we think might give us a link to what is true. Um, and to possibly be coming to a point such as that where everything gets thrown out and we're left with ourselves, a lot like the dark night of the soul for many of us, where there was no one, there was nothing, there was only me in the universe, and you know, you had to pull your finger out and take responsibility. I mean, I guess another way to say it would be, in a different way, would be, what is the bottom line? If this is a quantum thought reality, are our thoughts not the most important thing we can carry forward, so that anything we project from thought, be it prejudice, slanted, biased, whatever the case is actually what's going to happen? Another way you might say it is, can we have more faith in the mirrors of our lives, or is it what it is and you can let go or be dragged and it's just going to be what it's going to be? Do we have any say in this, do you feel?
I think it's both, but I'm leaning more towards it is what it is.
Mm,
A lot of what you're describing is pure consciousness. To exist in this form of pure consciousness, there's actually quite a bit of media that goes into this subject. The bottom line with that is when you enter pure consciousness, it's more again of an individual journey. So you can create in that space your own entire universe,
mm.
but that doesn't make it real for everything else. That only makes it real for you. Um, what was the second part of your question again?
Well, I mean, you know, as we expand our awareness, we come to higher vantage points. We all kind of have it, or people like us have it in us, that we want to serve. We want to equally serve ourselves, the other, and the Trinity. And what I'm trying to say is the bottom line our thoughts? If we are in a quantum thought reality, is our is our focus and our efforts better suited to be responsible for that, to project unbiasedness, unity, you know, in the field of our own existence where it's just me and the universe? Is that something, I guess what I'm saying is that something that you feel is out of reach for the vast majority? I get that you say it's an individual thing. I totally agree with that. But are we in a space where it might be that there are 10 million Jesuses and Ammas walking the earth as supposedly prophesied, or whatever the case is, that this is some kind of great awakening, or whatever the case is? So, bottom line is there anything more important than the thoughts that we're projecting, in your opinion?
Um, I want to say no. The reason for that being is if you entered a deep state of meditation, right? Um, let's say you're comatose. Your body is as still as possible, but you in your mind space, you can still imagine things and you're still living in your mind space. Um, so it's always going to be better to live in that heightened state of unity. You're going to bring that with you. You're going to carry that with you as you walk through life. Um, you know, usually people that I think get to that state, you know, they're humble. Yeah, you know, they don't say they're not on the street corner saying you need to find Jesus in order to find heaven. You know, they're not doing that. They're the ones that are giving $10 to a homeless person and not giving a shit how that person spends the money, or you know, just doing nice things for other people just because that's who they are, not to get any type of reward, you know, altruism and stuff. um, you keep walking through life in that way and humanity will get better. It's called self-organized criticality. It's an inherent part of emerging theories of unified field theories and theories of everything that are starting to gain more traction that opposes the Big Bang Theory. It's basically they call it the sand pile model. So if you have a pyramid of sand, it only takes 1 grain of sand to topple and collapse the pyramid. In power systems, self-organized criticality actually prevents wave collapse. So it allows you to be on that precipice for as long as you want. It allows, it prevents chaos from getting too chaotic. It helps create that balance. Um, so, I mean, if there's enough critical inertia, enough momentum of people thinking this way on this planet, then I think it's entirely plausible that we could topple the scale, so to speak, to enter that new dimension of awareness and possibly um, the physical alteration to the human body itself. I'm not going to say again, I don't think that's going to happen overnight. Um, but it's like a ball rolling down a hill with the old adage, more moss it's going to attract, right? So um, if we can, and we're all here, we are all finding ourselves on this wavelength. We all have this same general idea. Um, so I think we're going to get there. I think it could happen. I think it's totally plausible. Anything is possible. We just have to give it time, be patient, definitely be humble as we keep going. And again, be kind and respectful, that you don't have to, you can still have boundaries and stuff, of course, but always walk through life in that mindset, and it'll create, um, that's another thing of self-organized criticality, is that little tiny grain of sand creates this huge ripple effect, right? This huge change in the entire system. You are that green sand as a person. You're holding the door open for somebody behind you as you walk through a building, regardless of who they are, you don't know them. That in and of itself, that little small act could change that person's day, could change their entire outlook on life. So it's very, very important to keep those things in mind as we move forward. To have that emotional IQ and the EQ, you have to EQ it like a DJ. Um, you know, understand your triggers, work through your triggers, not react to your triggers impulsively. Um, and if we do all these things, we do have a good, really good chance of getting to the place that you're speaking of.
Well, I think it's up to us.
It is. So
And we
it
can't
always
put it
is.
on
Yeah.
we can't put it on anybody else, it seems. Yeah, it's I mean it's not a quagmire, but I mean this is a I mean, how do you explain it? I mean, we've been in this human condition as you spoke of. Parts of it seem to be falling away. Parts of it seem to be falling away as they're being exposed and dealt with and faced. That has to be along the lines of what you're talking about, in that it's the individual souls, enough of them or whatever, have affected some type of mirror, paralleling and reflecting this what you're speaking of, which is individual growth, individual accountability, responsibility. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's I knew this was going to be different, and I really have been seeking an open conversation, in this type of atmosphere on any subject, like it's just cool to be able to have a conversation, and we've all come, we have all evolved. But if I look back at shows 3 and 4 and 5 years ago, I was a different person, obviously. But to
Yeah.
be able to have a conversation in respect and honor and reverence and openness, uh, to me, that itself must have some kind of impact um, beyond us. you know, whoever's witnessing, because there we go. I mean, how can you have a quantum thought uh, creative space if you don't have anything to observe?
Right? It's like,
That's the
again,
whole point. You know what I mean? So,
if you went in meditation and close your eyes, that's all you have.
right,
That's all
exactly.
that's left.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Wow. Yeah. Hey, man, I'd love to do this again down the road, man. It's really good reconnecting with you. I can't
oh,
believe
absolutely.
it actually has been 7.5 years, because I
Yeah.
remember now when it happened.
I
Um,
don't, I don't remember if that was before or after I fasted for 3 weeks.
I
Um,
don't remember, but I remember you came in and you were like a mad scientist. I do remember that. It was very, very informative, very,
oh,
very
I'm still a
powerful.
mad scientist.
Yes,
But before we go, actually, I got one story that I want to tell you,
please, sure.
and I got to turn my camera around for this because it's a little visual. So let me see how we do that. There we go. Welcome to Mikasa. That's my flight simulator. There's a painting that I built the canvas and the frame, and my entire family and we all painted it together. So that was really fun. All right. So here's my. You still with me, Todd? I lost video.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just
Okay,
I'm
gotcha.
off camera so they can see.
All right. So I spend a lot of time on my porch, drinking and smoking out here, just in nature. And I came out here one day, and my neighbor and her kids were in the street right there, and they were looking at something, and I'm like, "What's going on?" So I go over there to look, check out what's happening, and there is a chipmunk running around in circles, like it was crazy or something. And they couldn't figure out what's going on with it. And I looked for a second, and I was like, something's wrong with its one of its back legs there. And the mom goes and looks in harder, and she's like, "Oh yeah, it doesn't have a leg. It lost a leg." So we're sitting there talking for a little bit, and the daughter is like, "Well, what can we do? Can we try to help it?" Such a kind soul, right? Very awesome. I love that she said that and asked that. And I was like, "Well, unfortunately, there's really not much we can do with a chipmunk with a lost leg. We're just going to have to let nature take its course." And she asked me, it was like, "What's going to happen?" I was like, "Well, I don't know, but I don't think it's going to last that long in nature, right?" So they leave, they go back to their house. I come back on my front porch. Actually, I go inside to get another beer. And by the time I come outside again, the chipmunk made it to like right here in the road. And I'm outside drinking my beer, smoking. The next thing you know, either a hawk or a falcon swoops down like this, grabs it, comes up through here, does a little spiral, and goes back out. And I was like, that is crazy. Like I just said to this girl, I don't think it's gonna last that long. I go inside to tell my wife what happened. I come back out. I'm chilling here on my porch. Guess what happens next? The bird comes back and it hangs out on the nearest branch of this tree and looks me dead in the face for a minute straight before it flies away. But that's not the craziest part of the story. I think the craziest part was that happened on, like, I don't know, like a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
Hmm.
And I don't talk to my brother all that often. But on that Sunday, I decided to call him and tell him the story. And he was like, "Dude, that's crazy. I was just about to call you." And I was like, "Oh, really? Why?" And he said, "Well, our mutual friend, he finally passed. He died this morning." And I was like, "Wow."
Holy
Um,
shit.
yeah, and he was also a music producer. He's dedicated his whole life to it. He was an awesome human being,
Hmm.
and yeah, it was just that was a very nutty week. uh,
There's been a lot of those.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
I keep Jordan Maxwell, other people, talk about the symbolism, the symbology, mostly in regard to, the fuckery. You know what I mean? Saturn's cube, and but the symbolic nature of existence, and I know it's not just me. Here in these last the clarity or the loudness or the uh, ability to see what's happening based on what you're experiencing seems to be getting louder. So there's I mean, if you'd have stopped at the hawk coming back and staring at you, that would have been enough right there.
Yeah, yeah, it
And to
was.
have that, I call them physical synchronicities. You can't really make sense of it, but it's like you said earlier about the double numbers and stuff back in the day. There's something telling us, yes, you're on the right path. And it doesn't make sense in the world, and you can't prove it scientifically. You know what I mean? But it's there. And yeah, that's a great story. Great way to
I,
end it.
I do have to caution people though,
Mm,
because it can, if you study Carl Jung and synchronicities,
mm,
um, there's a caveat to that. And as personal as it might seem, and as much as you want to make it a synchronicity, mathematically speaking, it has the math has to be there. So
right.
it has to be two acausal events. Um, the more, the less probability for each one, the greater the synchronicity.
Mm,
You're going to see 1111 every day. The probability for that is pretty high, right? So just
mm,
seeing 1111, not that big of on the scale probability, not that important. Um, but again, something with two things with very, very low probability, very synchronistic.
mm,
Um, just be critical in yourselves, in your lives, to not jump to saying it's a synchronicity right away.
mm,
Try to critically analyze it. Um, and I'm not trying to take away from people's perspectives and diminish their experiences, but I just want you to critically evaluate. Um, it's like people looking at a rainbow back in the day. They didn't know what it was. They were just like, look at this beautiful thing in the sky. It must be God or whatever. And then science came along and was like, well, no, this is why it happens. So I always try to put try to look at things through a scientific mind first, and then go to your imagination.
mm, mm. Something to think about.
Yeah. Again,
Another,
nothing
huh?
wrong with being too imaginative.
No,
That's
no. I
fine.
mean,
You do you, people, but
obviously it's not one or the other. It's right in between. There's
yeah.
some kind of center of the wave. What is it? The wake. Like if there's a wake going through the water, that,
Mm.
which is what I was asking earlier. I mean, I don't know, but like there's something inside of us that's always headed that direction, or you know what I mean, like the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, it wants to go forward. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
that put and we can try to hide it and push it back as much as we want, but it's still going to be nagging at us,
yeah.
trying to push us forward.
Well, we're
Sure.
definitely past the point of no return. There's no going back. You know what I mean? It's like Dick
you
Gregory
know
said, once the universal God puts the lenses on you, you can't go back. But yeah.
Yep.
Well, Robert, it's been great. Blessings of grace to you and your beautiful family. And,
Thank you.
thank you for
Thanks,
sharing your space with us and showing us around. I'm going to
thanks
hit you up
again
on
for
the,
having me
yeah,
on here.
yeah. Yeah, I'm going to hit you up. I want to ask you a little bit about what you're doing on the music side. And, but yeah, I'll reach out to you, man. And thank you for taking the time and coming into the sacred space, man. I really enjoyed it, and it was very informative. And I hope to do this again down the road.
Awesome.
All right,
Appreciate it.
brother.
Glad to hear that, and I hope life treats you well.